Hello, I'm Dane, and this is Dan Explains. Over the last 50 years or so, there's been a big movement to stop the construction of nuclear power plants and shut down existing ones, and it's been quite successful. It's been driven by the fear of nuclear accidents and what we're going to do with all that nuclear waste the plants produce. Well, what if I were to tell you that to produce the same amount of energy as nuclear, the burning of fossil fuels releases much more radioactive waste? Let me explain why. Nuclear power has been around for quite a while now. The first human-made energy-producing reactor was built in 1942 at the University of Chicago as part of the Manhattan Project, which aimed to create the first nuclear bomb. I say human-made because there have been naturally occurring reactors found as well. The reactor was called the Chicago Pile 1 and only produced about half a watt of energy. It was a good proof of concept, and nuclear energy quickly took off after that, kicking off what people called the atomic age, which lasted until around 1970. During that time, people viewed nuclear power in a positive light. With the looming threat of a civilization-ending nuclear war, by the 1960s, people's attitudes began to change. It came to a head in 1979 with the 3 Mile Island incident that put the proverbial last nail in the coffin of the industry in the United States. Pretty much to this day, requiring the United States to lean on fossil fuels for its source of energy rather than moving to nuclear like everyone thought would happen. People thought they were trading technology that produced extremely toxic waste for a tried and true one that produces less waste. Consider that when most people think about pollution from coal, they think about black soot and carbon dioxide. Most people wouldn't look at coal and think it's a radioactive substance. And for the most part, they'd be correct. Coal only contains trace amounts of things like uranium and thorium, a little more than 2 parts per million on average, which is a really small amount. To put 2 parts per million into perspective, if the atoms were people, you'd only find 18 people in the city the size of New York that were radioactive. Of course, nuclear fuel is nearly 100% radioactive. So, how could coal release more radioactive waste? Well, it's all in the energy density. To get the same energy output as a kilogram of reactor-grade uranium, you need to burn about 20,000 metric tons of coal. That's 20 million kilograms of coal. That's a lot of coal. Suddenly that 2.1 parts per million of radioactive material becomes a much bigger issue. Coal is mostly carbon too, so that should put a perspective on how much carbon dioxide 1 kilogram of uranium can keep out of the atmosphere if it was powering a nuclear power plant. If you do the math, that much coal produces about 42 kilograms of radioactive uranium and thorium waste. So that's 42 times as much radioactive waste as nuclear. Although some of the waste does make it into the air, most of it is contained in ash, which is collected and either dumped in a river or put in a landfill. Some of it even finds its way into construction material. You may say, well, that's all well and good, but isn't most fossil fuel power these days coming from natural gas? It's not like natural gas is going to contain uranium or thorium. Well, that's true. An element doesn't have to be a solid to be radioactive. One of the decay products of radioactive materials in the ground is an inert, chemically speaking at least, noble gas called radon. It seeps from the rocks into the pockets of natural gas underground, at which point it's drawn out and pumped into power stations and even people's homes. There is much less radon in the gas than uranium and thorium in coal, but radon only has a half-life of about around 4 days, which means it's much more radioactive than uranium and thorium. That's also a good thing though. Once it gets into the air, after a few days, it will most likely decay to lead, so only people who live near gas-fired power plants have to worry about it. What? Oh yeah, I mentioned it goes into people's homes as well, where it's used for heating and cooking. Now for heating purposes, most furnaces vent outside, so it's not an issue as long as you don't spend huge amounts of time standing near the vent. The larger issue is cooking. The byproducts of burning the natural gas, which include the radon, get released directly into the home. At least with nuclear power plants, the radiation is contained inside a reactor and not being pumped into people's homes. Now, all of this makes fossil fuels sound scary. Radioactive rivers, radioactive drywall being used to build your home, and even radioactive air inside your house. Why would the EPA let companies do this? Well, That's the thing. The concentration of radioactivity released from burning fossil fuels is so low, it doesn't need to be worried about, for the most part. And for nuclear, the amount of radioactive waste produced is 42 times lower per kilowatt hour, and it releases virtually no other sorts of pollution. So, maybe it's high time we take a second look at nuclear energy. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please press the like button. Subscribe to my channel and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon, link in the description. The more people who support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.